Welcome back to India on 99.94. I'm Nikesh Rugani, your host, BBC commentator, alongside Sarah Waris, as always, of Wisdom. And Sarah, we're here today to discuss the Indian women's series against Australia. 5 T20 matches. It feels to me as though it's a little bit more about just the result and just the cricket that was played and just what this series has done for women's cricket in India. I know you and Jared discussed this briefly midway through the series as well, particularly after that India victory with the match that was tied at the DY Patil and the crowds that we've seen and all that kind of stuff. Just tell us a little bit more about from your point of view, what does this series mean for women's cricket in India?
Hi Nikesh, good to be here as always. Yeah, this series years later when people are just scrolling through the scoreboards and all, they'll be like, okay, 4-1, it was a very one-sided series, and Australia, the world champions, India never had a chance, etc., etc. All that is true, like, but the overall context of the series, I think, can be a game changer in Indian cricket. Just the fact that during the fifth T20, India had lost the series. The match was on a Tuesday, and there were more than almost 20,000 people in Mumbai watching the match. That speaks volumes, A, about the fact that people are there to support the Indian women's team, and B, that people are voluntarily there to do it. So the first two or three T20Is, I think they were free, or like they were free, or they were not priced, they were free, and all that. So people had a bigger incentive that, I'll go and I don't have to spend money, I'll just watch cricket. Obviously, for the last T20I, two T20Is, the BCCI was like, okay, wow, this went beyond what we expected. And so they priced the tickets, obviously, not a lot. It was around 100, 200 rupees in Indian currency, which is not a lot. But still, the fact that people paid for it, it was a working day, Tuesday, and they traveled. Mumbai traffic, everyone knows about Mumbai traffic. They uh, went and saw the women's team who have lost the series already and went and supported them. That, to me, like, that is the real big deal about this women's about this series. Like, that is, that potentially has the um like, Indian cricket could go on so much further because of this series. And this series just shut up the BCCI, all the naysayers who are like, no one watches women's cricket, no one watches it willingly. But this series, I think, just went a long way in shutting them up and showing that, the women's IPL can be a big success. I know you didn't see the series, but staying there, like in England, what were the reports like? Like, were there any sort of coverage, newspaper clippings, or just based on what you could
Yeah,
read?
it was disappointing that it wasn't shown on TV in the UK. There were some highlights on the BCCI website, so every opportunity I got, I had a look at that. Enjoyed watching the tied match, the second one at the DY Patil, which India then won in the Super Overs. So saw bits and bobs as well. I mean, just look, scrolling through social media and speaking to people within cricketing circles as well. I think the feeling was there that, look, this
Hmm.
could be a landmark moment for women's cricket in India. You're right. The BCCI have got this sort of attitude that nobody watches women's cricket, Indian women's cricket in particular, and there's just not as much interest there, which is why they've pushed back the IPL for years and years, and finally they've given into the pressure really and announced that it'll take place in March. I think one good thing actually that the BCCI did even before this series was, we were talking about this as well. Should the women's IPL be played alongside the men's IPL and have double
Hmm.
headers like they do in the Big Bash, or they used to do in the
Yeah.
Big Bash quite a lot? They do in the 100, of course, in England, pretty much all double headers there. And I think in a way it's good that the women's IPL is going to have its own separate window, because that will really just focus on the women's competition. It won't be people turning up to stadiums who want to see the men, but they might turn up for the last hour or so of the women's game just to, soak up the atmosphere or whatever. It will just be all about the women's game. So that will be a test, first and foremost. But also, I think it will give the women's game an opportunity to put itself in the shop window without any other distractions. I mean, we don't have that great detail on the women's IPL as of now. We've got the dates, we don't have the teams, we don't have, I mean, there's rumours about certain overseas players already having been signed up to participate in the auction and all that kind of stuff, but we just don't know officially any of these details. So hopefully some of them will come soon as well. But I think, yeah, the overall feeling around the world in cricketing circles is that this has done a massive amount for women's cricket in India. You just got to look at the crowds. The fact that, okay, it was 4-1 to Australia, but it was a bit closer than that, wasn't it? I mean, okay, they got comfortably beaten in a couple of games, but then, the super over finished, India losing one of them by 7 runs. There were moments. India had their moments. And I suppose the frustrating thing from their point of view is they've had these moments against Australia many times in recent history, and they've usually been on the wrong side of these moments, bar that super over win at the DY Patil as well. I suppose, Sarah, if there's one thing you can take away from the actual cricket, it's that. It's just those big moments India don't seem to win against this brilliant Australian side.
Yeah. Yeah, while that is true, there's also the fact that, this Indian women team is there to defeat Australia once a year. They defeated Australia in 2020, they defeated Australia in 2021 in that ODI match, and then 2022, which was also Australia's first and only T20I defeat since March 2021, which, is a massive feat for this women's team who are still dependent on a few players like the Mandanas and the Harmanpreet Kaurs and Dipti Sharmas, and to run them close again and again in the Commonwealth Games final. You never know, they could have defeated them. Even in the first match which India and Australia played, it was a very close match. Even last year there was this ODI match where, if not for that Jhulan Goswami no ball, India could have gone on to win the series. You never know. So it's they keep churning out these performances against Australia, despite, we've spoken about it 100 times, despite all the lacks and the flaws and the lack of infrastructure and the lack of experience and everything. And just again, I know I'm repeating myself, but the fact that if you have 1% of interest, like if the BCCI has 1% of interest towards women's cricket, so much can change. Another point about the women's IPL, it's from March, the first week of March. We don't know who the teams are. We don't know the auction, like what the teams will look like, because obviously there is no auctions or anything in place. The men's IPL, which is going to be held later on in March, they already have the auction coming up in a few days. So, that again just shows that, the haphazard planning of women's cricket in India. And also the fact that the BCCI is, they've opened an auction for the media channels to come and bid for them, like, for the broadcasting rights and all. But if the channels, they don't know who the teams are, then I think that's very unfair that, you are asking them to bid without telling them who the teams are. Obviously, if there's teams like Chennai and Mumbai or RCB even involved, the stakes could be higher for, the channels who are bidding for them than what if there are no IPL teams involved. So at least, there should be clarity from the BCCI towards everyone involved, towards the stakeholders, that, there is a women's IPL team of RCB involved. So obviously then Sony or Star or News 18 or whoever is bidding will be like, okay, now people will be more interested. So it's just this overall lack of clarity and just everything which is really frustrating, being a women's cricket follower.
Well, here's something. You look at the BCCI and it's basically the same people running the men's game as it is the women's game. And I get it, it's one umbrella organisation that looks after all cricket now. It never used to be the case, but they look after women's cricket as well. Do they need a role within the BCCI? Just get somebody like an Anjum Chopra in, or a Mithali Raj or Jhulan Goswami, or somebody that's been there and done it, to be the head of women's cricket. Just create a board position head of women's cricket, have it on a 3-4 year cycle, whatever it might be, and just get somebody in who knows what they're doing and who cares about it.
Yeah.
Isn't that the answer?
That is the answer, but the fact that the BCCI president, ex-BCCI president Saurav Ganguly, till a few months ago said that women's IPL is not going to be staged because women's cricket doesn't have enough talent, doesn't have enough pool, that itself shows that, at the core, they themselves feel that women's cricket is a lost cause. So why we even investing in it? Why should we have a different branch of women's cricket like Mithali Raj and all on board? Why? Because women's cricket, no one watches women's cricket, no one cares for women's cricket. The women's IPL, again, I'm saying, is just being held because there's a lot of pressure, and I think that's the reason why it's being held. And yeah, so the fact that at the core they still believe that nothing is going to come of women's cricket, they're not going to invest in that. And for the first time ever, they're going to have the under 16 women's trophy, I think ODI and a league for under 16 girls in January. The BCCI has organized it for the first time ever. So that just shows that, till the under 19 stage, you're at your own. And then suddenly the under 19 stage, BCCI has these tournaments, and then they pick and choose these players. So it doesn't give a solid platform for these young women out there. That is the reason also why, the men's team, obviously they are superior, but superior in the sense that, they have more skills, because right from age group cricket, they know that, they have this structure in place, under 10, under 15, under 16, whatever. Women's team, they don't have any of these age group cricket. So that's another thing which the BCCI has to work on. And yeah, you're right, getting Mithali on board and all the other players will solve that, but are they interested? That's the main point, as always.
Well, you mentioned Saurav Ganguly there, and I've got a Saurav Ganguly link to all this. Saurav Ganguly, the player and the captain, that is. But we'll take a short break and we'll discuss on the other side.
You're listening to Cricket's Conversation on 99.94. Whatever your team, we have the show for you on podcast, YouTube, or on the 99.94 app. We have India, England, South Africa, West Indies, and now Sri Lanka covered. If you want to find us, the best way is to follow us on social media at 9994DM by downloading the 9994 app or Google 99.94 on podcast. We speak cricket.
So the link I want to make with Saurav Ganguly is it was his test side under his captaincy in 2001 that ended that Australian winning streak of 16 test matches in a row. They'd lost the first test in that series, that famous series in Mumbai. And it was the same old story, really. Sachin gets some runs, but India just rolled over. They had opportunities in that match in the second innings as well, but we won't discuss too much of the details of that. It was Gilchrist and Hayden who took it away from India in the end with those hundreds when they were 5 down quite early. But then to beat Australia like they did at Eden Gardens in that test match, and then in Chennai basically thump them. This Indian women's side has done a similar thing in ending those streaks, like you mentioned earlier. They ended another streak here with that win at the DY Patil in the second match of this series. I think this could be a sort of similar moment in women's cricket because we saw what that ending that Australian streak did to the men's side across all formats, really. Under Ganguly's captaincy, they then went on to start winning series abroad, start winning finals, including the NatWest in 2002. And, when they'd come up so close before and they'd been losing in finals quite a lot in these tri-series and these various tournaments, they finally got over that hurdle and they sort of went on to start winning matches abroad. They drew a test series in Australia and, the rest is history, really. This women's side has got the potential to do something similar as well. I'm not saying they're going to dominate in the same way as that Ganguly side did. And in fact, that Ganguly side was successful, but it didn't dominate world cricket. Australia was still the number one side, but it was just that India were more consistent. And I think this will give them real belief because, look, the last time they ended the streak, they were down under in Australia. You're right, they had opportunities to win that particular series. It didn't happen. Australia then go on this brilliant run. But it's been a wonderful year for the Indian women's team overall, hasn't it, as well? Because if you look at it, they won in England against a very strong England side, albeit not full strength, but still a very, very strong England side. They then, before that, they got to the Commonwealth final, and it was only this great Australian side which stopped them getting over the line. And again,
They
there were
could have won that,
opportunities.
yeah.
There were opportunities, in that match as well. But they thumped England in the semi as well, which, that was a real statement. And then, just what this series has done, despite the result, I mean, it's just
Asia
been
Cup.
wonderful. Yeah, the Asia Cup as well, of course. So it's been a great year for Indian women's cricket. And I think going forward under this leadership of Harmanpreet Kaur and Smriti Mandhana as the vice, and this new talent pool coming through as well, it's great to see so much talent within the Indian women's team, despite what the BCCI have said. I think the future looks good. Would you agree?
Definitely it does. And especially I think the emergence of Richa Ghosh, who again, to like to say it again, Richa Ghosh wasn't part of the Commonwealth squad, the Commonwealth Games squad. She wasn't a part of that squad. Smriti Mandhana was surprised about it, and again the BCCI selectors and how they do their planning and all that was put in question. But I think the emergence of Richa Ghosh will help fix for India a lot of their issues which they have faced till now. That it was always the top order. It was a lot of reliance on Mandana. It was a lot of reliance on Harmanpreet Kaur. Shamima hasn't really lived up to her potential as much, has not been as consistent. So it was mostly on these two, and of course Shafali Verma. And the presence of Richa Ghosh will, I think, just add so much balance to the 11, because we've done a podcast where people are where we said that India just field a specialist wicketkeeper, which can't be the case because in the era where everything is changing, you need batters, you need all rounders, and to have Richa Ghosh in the team is just a big moment, like a huge moment for her, and I think that could be the step of something new for them. Richa Ghosh has a strike rate of 139.17 in the middle order, and before her, no Indian between positions 5 to 8 had made more than 200 runs and had a strike rate of 120, which speaks volumes about how what the Indian team was struggling in. And with a strike rate of 140 in the middle order already, she's just proven to be this fearless batter, goes in at the death and just hit sixes. And even that for 4 T20, I think, which India lost by 7 runs, India could have well won that. And it just these small game awareness which they seem to be lacking. Like in that match, Richa Ghosh was batting brilliantly, and then I think it was in the penultimate over where Dipti Sharma took a single, and she was on strike for the 20th over, and India needed around 15 or 16 runs to get in the last over. And it was like, that why are you taking the single when Richa Ghosh is batting there? You could have well given the strike to her. And this is not a one off. This happened in the match which was tied also. It was the 18th over where both of them were batting again, and Dipti Sharma took a single and she was on strike for the 19th over, the first ball of the 19th over, when Richa Ghosh had a strike rate of 200 odd in that innings. If not for Devika Vaidya's 4 in the last over, India could well have lost that match. So it's just these game awareness and all, and because it's happened twice in this same series in the span of 2 or 3 matches, you can't say that it was just a lapse of concentration. It's something which maybe you strengthen the support staff. Maybe you have a psychologist in there, maybe you have a mental health specialist in there, maybe you just have someone to help you with all the other aspects, to tell you these small nuances, because I think they just have one coach right now, one batting coach who is maybe doubling up as the head coach also, because Ramesh Pawar was removed. And I think that it's these small things. If the Indian women's team, they work on it, they identify it and then work on it, they could just become this a superior team. And yeah, they'll keep running Australia close. Won't say they can defeat Australia consistently, that will take some time, but yeah, signs are encouraging.
Rishikesh Gunitka, right?
Yep.
The coach, famous for that boundary that he hit against Pakistan to
Yeah.
win India that match all those years ago. I think it was 1998, 97, something like that, in that final in Dhaka. To chasing 300 plus in those days was quite something. I mean, look, with him there, obviously he's been the batting coach. He's kind of doubling up now. Do you think somebody like him has had a word with Dipti though? Because okay, yeah, that game awareness, and Dipti's not known as a big striker of the ball, but if you look at like her intent, I think her intent has been
Yeah.
a little bit better in this series. If you bat in that middle order, you've got to be able to score quickly, otherwise there's no point in you being there. She got 53 off 34 in the final match, and 8 boundaries, 6 as well. It was in a losing cause, yes, but it was like a lone hand in that Indian lineup. And I've seen some of the highlights of some of those shots and stuff, and there was good intent there. She's got the capability. Do you think somebody's sat her down and they're sort of grooming her alongside Richa Ghosh as well as these two explosive players in the middle order, or at least attacking players in the middle order?
Yeah, I hope that's the case, because yeah, there's a lot of dependence on Mandana right now. I was just looking at the stat where it was something like, almost very similar, eerily similar to Virat Kohli, both number 18s and, chase masters in their own right and everything. Mandana, it's when she's unbeaten, 9 out of 10 times India have gone on to win the match. So again, shows, the dependence on her and everything. But then she fails, and when she fails, it's almost like, okay, match is over. It's almost like, how Virat Kohli, once he departs in a run chase, you're like, okay, match is over, something of that sort. But yeah, it was encouraging to see Dipti Sharma yesterday scoring those runs, and especially batting with the intent, as you said, because India have lacked that firepower in the middle order. They didn't have Richa Ghosh. It was, you could say, it was almost a team built of bowlers who could bat a bit and batters who could bowl a bit. It was something like that, except the top 3 or 4. So yeah, I hope that Dipti Sharma now carries it forward. The T20 World Cup is coming up, and in South Africa, and I just hope that um, that is another step towards changing women's cricket in India. And I hope they finally break the jinx. They'll have to face Australia in the final again, and the one time they defeat Australia in the year, I hope it's in the 2023 T20 World Cup final, because what that win will do will be huge for Indian cricket.
Absolutely, yes. A T20 World Cup coming up, as well as the Women's IPL shortly after that. Right, we'll take another short break and we'll be back on the other side.
If you love the language of cricket and want more, then head over to the 99.94 app and you can hear all of our podcasts and cricket commentary. We're adding new shows all the time and covering cricket series from all over the world. Be the first to hear all of our announcements by following us on social media at 9994DM. Welcome to Cricket's Conversation.
So we mentioned the T20 World Cup. Obviously, now, looking at the way India have performed in these big tournaments, the expectation is for them to get to the final at least. Or, it depends if they come up against Australia in the semis. They've got to be there or thereabouts, right? That is the expectation now for this Indian women's team. Can they get over the line? That's another question. But then straight off the back of that, almost, is the women's IPL. Are you concerned that the women's IPL, albeit we talked about it's great, it's got its own window, it is going to happen, though, during the middle of the India versus Australia men's test series, the Border Gavaskar Trophy. Are you at all concerned by that?
I had never really thought of that, but I hope the timings work for them. I hope they're sensible enough to keep 8 night matches by the time the tests are over, which will then allow people who are watching or people who are traveling for the games to be there. And you never know with the BCCL, they'll just slot a game at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, like they've done before. So won't be surprised. But yeah, I just hope that they have the sense to place it differently. And hopefully, I know I might be very optimistic or something, but I wish that that won't really affect women's IPL, because from what we've seen in Mumbai in these 5 series, that people are there to watch cricket. And as I said, I had said this earlier, that Mumbai is a city which is not starved of cricket. It has a lot of cricket. So the fact that okay, you can understand people going out and watching women's cricket in a place like Vadodara, maybe, which doesn't have an IPL team, or uh, where people are like, okay, I'm going to see the Indian team play. Here, Mumbai, there are a lot of internationals. The women IPL was there last year. All the IPL matches, almost all, were held in Mumbai. So you can say that they're not devoid, like they don't are not short of cricket, but the fact that they willingly went and saw these matches is a huge positive for me.
I might flip it on its
Yeah.
head, though, and say, what's the population of Mumbai? About 30 million, 15,
Million. Yeah, I'm not sure.
It's tens of millions of people, right? There's a lot of people in Mumbai. And I might flip it on its head and say, well, out of 20, 30 million, whatever there is in Mumbai, surely there's 40,000 who are women's cricket fans, right? It's not a big percentage if you look at it like that. So, yeah, it's great they went, but there's always going to be people. I mean, it's like you say, it's still the national team, it's still India. And if these are people who do follow the women's national team, then there's a lot of people in Mumbai, and this is just a small percentage of them. There might be 25 million people or 28 million people who don't care about women's cricket in Mumbai as well. But I think the thing that really impressed me was the viewing figures, right? Because we don't have official figures for television viewing, which is obviously still going to be the number one, you would assume. But even the streaming figures on Hotstar were outrageous. They were brilliant. And that, I think, sort of rubber stamps the interest in women's cricket. The crowds are one thing, but in a city like Mumbai, we got so many people, it's hit and miss. Because it's like in London, right? If you're playing in England, in London, there's 10 million people. There's bound to be at least 20,000 of those who are big Test cricket fans. That's why they sell out the Oval and Lords and whatever. But if you look at it, probably 9.95 million don't even like cricket, don't know about cricket. So, you can get a false sort of sense from that. But I think those viewing figures, that's what really did it for me. They were really impressive, weren't they, on Hotstar?
Yeah, by the 4 T20I, by the end, it was 12 lakhs, which is like more than what the Super Over even had. So, again, I think the timing also worked. The fact that the men's team weren't playing at exactly the same time. I don't know if you remember, it was India versus South Africa in 2021, when the Indian women's team played a match from 7 p.m. against South Africa, and the Indian men's team was playing a T20I series against England on the same day at the same time, 7 p.m. Obviously, people are going to watch the men's team. Like that's a no-brainer. There are some who will watch with two screens and all. But yeah, again, it's just how you market the series, how you market the women's team. That's more important. And just one more question I had about people going on and watching these matches. Do you think with the IPL coming up, do you think these bigger centers should host matches, or places like you can say Vadodara, or places which don't host a lot of international matches? So p- people might go and see matches in Vadodara, but then the overall count and just the vibe in a place like Mumbai or a Bangalore where people are watching will be greater and will create more buzz. So, which do you think will be better for women's cricket?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, obviously, being in the big stadiums in big cities is great for the cricketers themselves to get to play in these stadiums and hopefully in front of big crowds. But then, yeah, taking the game to smaller towns. And it's not just the women's game. The men's game should be doing it a little bit more often as well. I used to like the idea, and I hope it comes back, of these sort of second stadiums for IPL franchises. And maybe the women's IPL can follow a similar path where if there is a Mumbai franchise, they play X amount of matches in Mumbai, but they go and play a couple somewhere else. And, whether it be Pune or whether it be somewhere else in Maharashtra. And, same goes for like a franchise from Punjab, for example. Do they go and play in Haryana? Or, it's there are different options of doing it. You don't have to play all your matches in smaller towns, and you could play the odd one or two just to give those fans an opportunity to see the game, to spread the game far and wide. So I do like that idea. I think a lot does also depend on the broadcasters, who gets the rights, and do these big shot commentators and big companies like Star, do they really want to go to these outbacks? They want to have a good time, don't they, in big cities? And nightlife isn't necessarily good in certain places. So those things, it's the reality. Those things come into it. So hopefully they do spread it a little bit. But it'd be nice to see the women getting to play in these big stadiums as well. Can you imagine a women's IPL final at the Narendra Modi Stadium in Ahmedabad, and it's a sellout? That would be brilliant, wouldn't it, for the women's game?
Yeah.
That would be better than having it in Vadodara or wherever. So, I think there is a scope for that, but I hope they don't just completely discard the big stadiums, because they deserve it. They've been waiting a long time, these women.
And there are better facilities. Like, obviously there will be better facilities at the Probon or the DY Patil than it will be in the smaller towns. So that is something which the Indian women's team need also right now. So again, I'm torn between where it should be held and all, but at least for the first edition of the IPL, I would want it to be held in these bigger stadiums where Chinnaswamy and Wankhede, maybe, I don't know if Wankhede will host the matches, but wherever it is, I hope, and Eden Gardens, hopefully I would want Richa Ghosh playing for my KKR team, and it'll be like just having people supporting, going out and supporting. And then maybe from the next season or so, you can expand a bit, you can go down to the other venues, but at least for the first season I would hope that it's in these bigger venues, so that just for the reason the BCCI don't say, oh, see, no one is coming and watching women's games in this place or that place. So just for that reason, I want, at least for the first few seasons, it's held in these bigger stadiums. And it's good for the players also, that I've played at Chinnaswamy, I've played at Eden Gardens. So yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, but we await further details of the women's IPL. Hopefully we'll get those details soon, and we'll discuss. Just quickly, Sarah, before we sign off, at the time of recording this podcast, I'm hearing KL Rahul has got injured in the nets in the build-up to the second test in Bangladesh. So no Rohit Sharma, potentially no KL Rahul. So if Rahul does miss that second test, we're hearing Pujara will be the captain. That will be India's fifth captain in 7 test matches, including Virat Kohli. It seems like such a long time ago. He's obviously out of the frame now. He doesn't need it. We'd love to see it, but it's not going to happen. Who would you have? If Rahul misses out, obviously Shubman would still open the batting. Who would you bring in?
I hope Abhimanyu Ishwaran comes in, but I think they'll go in with Pujara at the top of the order. That's what I feel they'll do.
Pujara top, and then who comes in?
Who comes in? Jaydev Unadkat maybe, but then
Extra
they'll have
bowler.
3 seamers. Yeah, they'll have 3 seamers. Do they have an extra batter? I'm not sure what the squad is like. Saurabh Kumar is there. He bats a bit.
Yeah, but with Rohit injured and they're bang out of options pretty much. I'd love to see Unadkat get a go. Look, we wish Rahul all the best. We hope it's not that serious and that he is fit.
Is there a series where, except the World Cup and Asia Cup, is there a bilateral series in the longest time where both Rahul and Rohit Sharma have played together? I can't seem to remember. It's
England 2021.
Yeah, after that they've never played together. Wow.
I think it was that. I may be
I
wrong.
think they played against Australia T20I series this year before the World Cup, but that was when
That was in the run up to the World
Yeah,
Cup, wasn't it?
yeah.
So yeah, they were involved in the World Cup obviously together. But yeah, bilaterals, tours, full
Yeah.
tours. It's been a while. But anyway, we wish Rahul all the best. Hope he recovers in time. By the time you're listening to this podcast, you may well know the answer to that anyway. But right, thank you very much for listening this time, and do join us again next time. Have a very Merry Christmas. We'll probably be with you after the second test, after the Christmas break. So if you're celebrating Christmas, wish you a very happy one, and we'll see you soon.